In League of Legends, there are a massive amount of items. This video goes over all the AD lethality items and when you should consider buying them. Champions that tend to buy these items are usually assassins with high damaging abilities which greatly benefit from ignoring their target's armor. The mythic item choices are Duskblade, Eclipse, and Prowler's Claw, all of which grant attack damage, ability haste, and lethality. Duskblade has a passive where your first attack deals additional damage and applies a quick slow. Upon scoring a takedown, this ability is reset and you also become invisible for a short time, with a mythic passive granting movement speed and ability haste. This should be considered on champions that want to go in, blow up a target, and then use the invisibility to keep themselves safe. Eclipse has a passive where after hitting an enemy with 2 attacks or abilities quickly, you deal bonus damage and gain a chunk of movement speed, with a mythic passive granting armor pen and move speed. This should be considered if you want more damage and mobility. Prowler's Claw has an active which dashes you to the target dealing damage and making them take more damage from you, with a mythic passive granting lethality and move speed. This should be considered if you want an additional dash and to make your target disappear. For core lethality items, we have Axiom Arc, Umbral Glaive, and Ghostblade, all of which grant AD, ability haste, and lethality. Axiom Arc has a passive where upon scoring a takedown, your ultimate's cooldown is greatly lowered. This should be considered on champions with powerful, game-changing ultimates. Umbral Glaive has a passive where when nearby an enemy ward, it reveals it and allows you to destroy it quickly. You should consider this if you want more damage and more map control for your team. Ghostblade has a passive which grants out-of-combat movement speed, and has an active which grants a good amount of movement speed and ghosting. This should be considered on any champion who wants a large amount of additional mobility. For other lethality items, we have Edge of Night, Serpent's Fang, and Servalda's Grudge, all of which grant attack damage. Edge of Night also provides health and lethality, and the main bonus is it grants a spell shield periodically, which will fully block the next spell that your opponent uses that hits you. You should consider this if your opponent's team is heavy on engage or heavy on burst damage, as being able to negate their opening spell means you can deny their engage or stop them from bursting you down. Serpent's Fang also provides lethality, and upon dealing damage to an enemy champion you reduce shields they currently have and future shields they'll obtain. This should be considered as a counter against champions which are heavily reliant on shields. And Servalda's Grudge also provides ability haste and percentage armor penetration. Where this isn't lethality, it has a similar role, and that it doesn't have crits like Lord Doms and Mortal Reminder, it's often found in lethality builds. However, its main attraction is it has a passive which makes all your abilities slow the targets they hit. This should be considered on champions that want to ensure they stick onto their targets, and the percentage armor penetration allows these champions to scale well into the late game. For other AD items commonly built alongside lethality, we have Neuromana, Bork, Rav Hydra, and Shojin, all of which grant attack damage. Neuromana also grants ability haste and mana. This is one of the items that builds out of Tear of the Goddess. This item is originally mana immune, but becomes Neuromana upon the tier fully stacking. This grants more AD the more mana you have, and grants you an on-hit effect which deals damage scaling with your maximum mana. This should be considered on champions that can make good use out of having tons of mana. Bork also grants attack speed and lifesteal. It has a passive where your attacks deal current health damage, and if you attack a target 3 times, they're dealt a chunk of damage and slowed. This is a universally pretty solid item, and should be considered on any champion that wants to be fighting. Rav Hydra also provides ability haste and lifesteal and makes your attacks and abilities deal damage in a circle around them. In addition, this can be stacked for additional AD and should be considered if you want to be better at split pushing or AoE damage. And Shojin grants additional ability haste and health, and has passives which grant even more ability haste and movement speed. Consider this on champions that want to move fast while spamming abilities.